When Pope Leo XIV stepped out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to deliver his first blessing to the world, thousands erupted in joyful cheers across the square. Flags waved, church bells rang. Yet somewhere far away, a very different sound echoed soft and emotional from a small house in the suburbs of Chicago. In that place, a family embraced tightly, tears streaming down their faces, watching every step of the boy they once knew, the boy who used to pretend to celebrate Mass in the living room, now become the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church. The story of Leo XIV doesn't begin with the papal throne. It begins in a far more ordinary place in the arms of his parents, in the pages of books read by his mother, in the simple yet profound teachings of his father, and in the golden light of Sunday evening sunsets shining through the stained glass of their church. From that, a quiet faith began to take root, growing stronger with the passing years, a moment that changed history. On May 8, 2025, the world witnessed a historic milestone. Cardinal Robert Francis Privos officially became Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. While millions of faithful around the world followed this momentous event, in a modest house in the southern suburbs of Chicago, two middle-aged men, John and Luis, were overwhelmed with emotion. They were the older brothers of the new pope. No one in that house could hold back their tears. For them, this wasn't just a historical moment, it was the affirmation of something their family had always believed, that love, faith, and a proper upbringing can take a child farther than anyone could imagine. The parents of a pope, sowers of faith. The story of Leo XIV is inseparable from the story of his parents, ordinary people who carried within them a wealth of morality and wisdom. His father, Louis Marius Privos, was an educator and school superintendent. A stern, disciplined, yet deeply loving man, he believed that education extended beyond books. It encompassed how one lived, behaved, and viewed the world with kindness. His mother, Minder Martinez, was a librarian with a deep love for books, the church, and lived her faith like it was second nature. She grew up in a family of 6 daughters in Chicago, graduating from Immaculata High School for Girls in 1928, a rare achievement for a woman of Spanish heritage at that time. Her love for learning led her to Louis. The two pursued and earned their graduate degrees together at DePaul University in 1949, a bond of not just love, but of shared values and ideals. The Privos family was not wealthy, but within their humble home, human dignity, Catholic faith, and a culture of learning were always prioritized. Dinner wasn't just a time to eat, it was a time to share faith, talk about life, and pray together. Robert, the little priest of everyday life. Robert was the youngest of 3 boys. From a young age, he showed signs of being different. While neighborhood kids played cops, doctors, or firefighters, Robert played Mass. The ironing board became an altar, candies became communion wafers, and his 2 older brothers played the part of the congregation. He was so serious about it, we didn't dare ruin his game, his eldest brother John once said with a fond smile. Some of our neighbors even joked, "Watch out, he might become the first American pope one day." At the time, no one could have imagined that joke would come true almost 70 years later. A family that knew how to plant seeds and let them grow. Both John and Luis would later go on to successful careers in education. They always held deep pride for their youngest brother. After Robert was elected pope, John shared in an interview with the New York Times, "If our parents were still alive, they'd be on cloud 9. The Privos family never chased fame or glory, but they understood the value of perseverance, kindness, and faith. They didn't raise their children to become a pope. They simply taught them to live decently, and the rest, they believed, was in God's hand. An American childhood, yet deeply sacred. The town of Dolton, where the Privos family lived, was a peaceful suburb south of Chicago in the 1952nd. There, Robert and his brothers grew up amid a blend of modern American culture and traditional Catholic life. They attended Mass at St. Mary of the Assumption Parish, where Robert began to admire the priesthood. It was where he first served at the altar, listened to sermons, and silently dreamed of one day preaching from the pulpit. It was also in that same home, through Bible stories told by his mother and his father's quiet pieces of advice, that Robert's faith slowly took shape, solid as stone, a calling that began early. "My brother never once doubted his calling," John shared. Even as a child, he knew exactly the path he would take. And indeed, it was not an easy road. Robert served as a missionary in Peru for over 20 years, living among the poor and underserved. He was later called to the Vatican, where he worked in the Roman Curia, gaining experience in diplomacy and global governance. And then, destiny called his name. On May 8, 2025, white smoke rose above the Sistine Chapel. A name rang out: Robert Francis Privos. I was lying in bed, watching the news, Luis recalled. The moment I heard the name Robert, I knew it was my brother. I jumped up, threw on some clothes, and danced like a child. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. But at the same time, I knew my brother's childhood dream had come true. Robert Francis Privos, now known as Pope Leo XIV, did not grow up behind gilded doors or ancient stone walls of the Vatican. He was born and raised among the quiet streets of suburban Chicago, where each winter was a challenge and every summer meant riding bikes around the neighborhood, attending Mass with his family, and reading in the small library where his mother worked. Yet it was in that very place, a place no one would expect to produce a pope, that a great vocation was nurtured. And it all began with two seemingly ordinary people who possessed extraordinary strength. His parents, the parents who quietly nurtured a vocation. If one were to look for the first image that led Robert to God, it would undoubtedly be that of Luis, his father, a strict, principled man, but full of love. As a school superintendent, he understood the power of education, but he didn't just teach with words, he taught by example. In that small home, values like honesty, perseverance, and responsibility weren't abstract ideals. They were lived out daily. Minder, Robert's mother, was the quiet source of inspiration, gentle and profound. As a librarian, she loved books and cherished knowledge. But even more, she loved God. Her faith wasn't dramatic, it was present in every small gesture: a morning prayer, a soft gaze while telling Bible stories, a tight embrace as the family prayed the rosary together. The Privos family never overcomplicated their faith. They simply lived with God naturally, and Robert grew up in that kind of faith, quiet, steady, but deeply rooted. A foundation built on education. In 1949, Luis and Minder graduated with master's degrees from DePaul University. They were a rare couple at the time, a man of French-Italian descent and a woman of Spanish heritage, united by a shared commitment to knowledge and a meaningful life. They not only succeeded academically, but also in building an inspiring family. Though not wealthy, they were rich in lived wisdom. From an early age, the three brothers, Luis, John, and Robert, were taught the importance of education and morality. Their parents didn't push them to achieve greatness. Instead, they instilled in them a love of learning, a respect for knowledge, and humility in success. A mother's influence in every step of Pope Leo XIV. When the media spoke of Minder Martinez, they often described her as a woman with warm eyes and hands always busy with books. She grew up in a large Spanish Catholic family in Chicago, a community that faced many challenges in mid-20th century America, but she never let circumstances shake her faith. According to the Chicago Tribune, she was one of the few Hispanic women of her time to graduate from a Catholic high school, an achievement that wasn't just personal, but symbolic. Knowledge and faith are powerful weapons. At home, she was more than a mother, she was a spiritual guide. Every night before bed, she read the Bible to her children, not as a sermon, but as a story. Her voice was warm, her gaze soft, and each tale came to life under candlelight memories that would later become part of Leo XIV's pastoral soul. The older brother speaks of the boy who became Pope. John Privos, the second eldest brother, is a retired principal from suburban Chicago. In an interview with the New York Times, he could barely contain his emotion when asked about the day his younger brother became Pope. "If our parents were alive, I know they'd be in seventh heaven," he said, eyes glistening. "But I also believe they're watching and smiling." That line didn't just express gratitude, it echoed from the heart of a family that quietly nurtured one of the most memorable popes of the modern era, a childhood shaped by sacred play. In an interview with ABC News, Luis, the eldest brother, recalled how young Robert often played celebrating Mass. While other boys used sticks as toy guns, Robert used the ironing board as an altar, candy as communion wafers, and his two brothers sat solemnly as the Congregation. We used to tease him, saying, "You're so holy, you'll probably be Pope someday." Luis laughed. And now, here we are. One neighbor even joked, "That boy is definitely going to be the first American Pope." Whether it was a prophecy or just a playful comment, no one could have imagined how that childhood fantasy would eventually surpass all expectations. A faith grown from memory and family. Pope Leo XIV did not arrive at the Vatican with an empty suitcase. He carried with him memories of a simple childhood, the teachings of his father, the gentle eyes of his mother, the laughter of his brothers, and the quiet peace of Sunday afternoons in a small parish church. When he stepped onto the Vatican balcony and raised his hand in blessing, the world saw a new pope, but he remembered the small wooden chair in the middle of the living room, where he once celebrated Mass under the curious gaze of his older brothers. And in that sacred moment, he was not just the leader of the global Catholic Church. He was the son of Chicago, the child of faith, the son of Luis and Minder, and the living symbol of the sacred bond between family and calling. A golden afternoon and light through the church window. Pope Leo XIV's memories are not of lavish journeys or grand religious festivals. What lingers in his mind are the golden afternoons in a small parish church where sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting soft hues onto the solemn face of young Robert as he read from the Missal. In an interview, he once said, "I never felt alone in a church. I felt embraced, as if every prayer found its way somewhere." That silence never made Robert feel lonely. On the contrary, it was in that space with only whispered prayers, the echo of the organ, and the scent of incense that he most clearly felt the presence of God. And the remarkable thing was, he wasn't afraid, he simply felt called. A home rich in knowledge and faith. The Privos family lived simply but with purpose. There was no extravagance, no luxury, but the home was full of values that few families could match. Luis, the strict but wise father, believed success didn't have to come in the form of grades, but in being a good human being. He often told his sons, "Knowledge will help you open doors to the future, but faith will help you know which ones are worth walking through." Minder, the mother, taught humility and the value of listening. She never forced her children to go to Mass, but during every dinner, there was always a moment of prayer. No one was obligated, yet all bowed their heads. These small gestures, seemingly minor, formed Robert Francis Privos, a man of the church even before he ever wore the vestments. A corner of the home birthplace of a pope. Don, Illinois, a town no one expected to appear in Vatican archives, became the unlikely origin of a boy who would one day lead over 1 billion faithful across the globe. As a child, Robert wasn't drawn to noisy games. While others played cops and robbers, superheroes, or baseball, he quietly built an altar out of cardboard boxes and played Mass. His older brothers, Luis and John, vividly remember it. Their little brother was so serious about it that he wouldn't let anyone joke during services. "I remember once laughing when Robert started speaking in a real priestly tone," John said with a chuckle. "He turned and scolded me, saying, 'If you can't be respectful, leave the church.'" End of church. No one thought the game was serious. But day after day, month after month, the passion never faded. It only grew with every homily, every Mass, and every glance toward the parish priest at St. Mary of the Assumption, whom Robert deeply admired. From a joke to a prophecy fulfilled, "You'll be Pope someday," was once just a family joke. But when the white smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, the Privos family was overwhelmed. It was no longer a game, no longer a dream. It was real. The moment I heard the name Robert Francis Privos, I knew that's BR. That's my brother, Luis told ABC 7 News. I jumped out of bed, threw on clothes, and started crying like a kid. I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. For John, the feeling was the same. We used to joke that he'd be Pope, but I never truly believed it would happen until today. I'm proud, I'm amazed, and I'm choked with emotion. Lou, a pope with a rich cultural heritage. Pope Leo XIV's roots form a vibrant mosaic of modern America. His father had French and Italian ancestry, while his mother had Spanish roots, with part of her family tracing back to the 7th Ward of New Orleans, a place rich in cultural blending from the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe. Though the family rarely discussed race or ethnicity, this cultural fusion quietly shaped in Robert an inclusive, humanistic worldview. Leo XIV does not come to the church as a white American or a Hispanic man, or a minority. He comes as a pastor, one whose heart carries many cultures, and whose faith embraces diversity as a core of the Christian message. A unique friendship with Pope Francis. Before becoming Leo XIV, Robert Francis Privos had a close friendship with Pope Francis. The two worked side by side on pastoral missions in South America, where they both learned their deepest lesson: to be near the people, to live among the poor, and to love in silence. Francisco and Robert were close friends, John shared. Even before my brother became a bishop, they already knew each other. Both lived simply and always prioritized the forgotten. Leo XIV, a centered leader who speaks when it matters. Neither aligned with the conservative bloc nor the progressive wing, Leo XIV is described by his brothers as a centrist but not a compromiser. He listens to cardinals, nuns, priests, and lay people, but he never hesitates to speak up when justice is at stake. My brother's never been a fan of the current immigration policies, Luis said bluntly, and I can say this with confidence: if something is wrong, he will not stay silent. This steady resolve, paired with calm composure, has made Leo XIV a symbol of modern papal leadership. Strong but not authoritarian, commanding but never distant. One family, one example, one beginning. The story of Leo XIV is not just a new chapter in church history. It's proof that from a humble family with warm meals and sincere prayers, a great calling can arise, one powerful enough to help reshape the direction of a global faith community. Robert Francis Privos, the boy who once used an ironing board as an altar and offered candy as the body of Christ, now blesses the faithful for real from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, and in the gentle breeze that blew through Vatican City that afternoon, it was as if one could hear the echoes of Chicago, where a little boy once believed that God's love began in the kitchen, on the sofa, and in the arms of his mother, a humble man amid a media storm. From the moment Pope Leo XIV appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, the world witnessed a fresh breeze sweeping through the Vatican. The solemn white vestments, the traditional Urbi et Orbi blessing, these remained, but his demeanor, gentle, natural, even slightly humorous, immediately gave the world a sense of familiarity. Honestly, I didn't expect to be chosen, he laughed in response to a question from an Italian reporter after the conclave. I thought I was there just to pray and support the one who would be elected. But then, God had other plans. A seemingly simple answer, yet one that left many pondering. Not because he joked, but because that humility revealed something clear. Leo XIV did not ascend to the papacy to be the center of attention, but to serve. As Pope Francis once said, "Those who do not live to serve do not deserve to live." Approachable, youthful, and candid. Not long after his election, Leo XIV made waves on social media with a moment of warm camaraderie and humor shared with world tennis number one Jannik Sinner at the Vatican. It wasn't a cold, formal audience, nor a stiff speech. Just light-hearted laughter, a few witty remarks, and a tennis racket gifted as a symbol of connection. When asked if he'd like to try swinging the racket, Leo XIV glanced up at the ornate ceiling and smiled. Better not. Who would want to see a volley flying straight into a 300-year-old chandelier? The crowd erupted in laughter. Global news outlets quoted the moment as an unspoken declaration. This is a pope who is very human, very real, and very close to the people. Don't bring the sinner. A play on words for the ages. A few days before their meeting, when asked if he'd consider joining a charity tennis match, he simply replied, "As long as you don't bring sinner." What seemed like an offhand comment quickly became headline material. Sinner not only referred to the tennis star, but also means one who sins. In English, a clever wordplay, both humorous and theologically rich. Clear convictions without extremes. Despite his friendly and open nature, Leo XIV is not one to be swayed by public opinion. On the contrary, he holds strong, clear views, especially on sensitive social issues. One of the key reasons the cardinals chose him was his rare balance of compassion and discipline. His brother Luis once said, "My brother doesn't lean left or right. He chooses the path of the gospel, listening to the vulnerable, but never compromising the truth." One example is Leo XIV's stance on immigration. He never hesitated to criticize harsh border policies. "We cannot preach mercy inside the church and then build walls outside in society," He once declared while serving as Archbishop, "Truth and compassion must go hand in hand." Leo XIV believes the Church cannot proclaim truth using only the language of condemnation. Truth without love is a blade, but love without truth is an empty emotion. When asked about modern societal changes, he once said, "The Church is not a museum to display ancient rules, but neither is it a stage to perform according to popular taste. We must walk with humanity with truth and love." A childhood defined by meaningful play. Going back to his early memories, nothing stands out more than the times Robert would pretend to conduct Mass at home. The ironing board became an altar, Nick candies were transformed into the Eucharist, and his brothers were the reluctant parishioners. The game happened every week, uninterrupted, like a private ritual for the young boy. A neighbor once told Robert's mother, "That child is different. He has the gaze of someone destined to lead." She simply smiled, gently stroked her son's hair, never knowing how prophetic those words would become. Over 2 decades as a missionary in Peru. Before becoming Pope, Robert Privos spent over 20 years as a missionary in Peru, one of South America's poorest and most complex regions. There, he not only taught and ministered but lived among the poor, slept in tin-roofed homes, and shared humble dinners of boiled corn and hard bread. Stories are still told of the American priest in worn-out sandals, wearing a faded cloth hat, who never refused a single prayer request from the villagers. Those years taught Robert a kind of resilience no book could offer: patience, humility, and strength rooted in simple faith. "In Peru, I learned how to remain silent in the face of pain, and to speak just enough for others to feel heard," he once said. The Pope for a connected age. In a world fractured by division and crisis, Leo XIV stands as a spiritual anchor not just for Catholics, but for anyone seeking peace amid the noise. He is present not only at the altar but also on social media, in sports arenas, at international summits, and in everyday conversations. That presence, sincere, open, and unfiltered, is exactly what the world needs. Not a pope who only preaches from a throne, but a spiritual father who steps down, listens, and walks with his flock through every corner of modern life. The father of a young church. He's not just the head of the church. He's the embodiment of hope, said a young parishioner in Brazil during Leo XIV's inauguration Mass. And that's what Leo XIV is doing. Breathing new life into the Catholic Church, an institution many once saw as rigid, severe, and outdated. With his simple lifestyle, kindness, and warm heart, he is bringing the Church back to its core: love and service. A symbolic choice, the papal name Leo. When Robert Francis Privos stepped onto the balcony and announced his papal name Leo XIV, the world seemed to pause for a brief moment. This was no random choice. In the nearly 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church, only 13 popes had taken the name Leo, and the most recent Leo XIII led the Church from 1,878 to 1,903, more than a century ago. Choosing Leo was not merely selecting a name. It was a declaration of ideals, mission, and the future direction of the Church under his leadership. "I chose the name Leo," the Pope said in his first meeting with the press, "because I want to rekindle the spirit of a courageous, close-to-the-people church that defends the vulnerable just as Pope Leo XIII once did." Leo XIII, the inspiration. Pope Leo XIII, who last bore this name over 120 years ago, is renowned for his social encyclical Rerum Novarum, the foundational document of modern Catholic social teaching. It defended workers' rights, condemned exploitation, and emphasized social justice. By choosing this name, Pope Leo XIV clearly signaled that he intends to carry forward that legacy, building a church that is not just a place of worship, but a voice for the poor, the oppressed, and those living on the margins. Beyond national borders, a global pope. He is the first pope from the United States, something unprecedented in church history. Yet this does not mean that Leo XIV represents any specific national identity or interest. On the contrary, his life story reflects a deeply global vocation, with over 2 decades of missionary work in Peru and extensive experience in the Roman Curia. Though he was born in Chicago, his brother John shared, "My brother's heart has belonged to the world for a long time." That sign. His election is a testament to the Church's global vision in a new era where geographical boundaries blur in the face of universal challenges like injustice, climate change, migration, and social fragmentation. A name, many expectations. Bringing back a papal name that has been absent for over a century carries significant expectations, both within and outside the Church. Veteran, the tablet journalist Christopher Lamb commented, "Leo XIV is a profoundly symbolic choice. That name is tied to moments of major transition in Church history. It implies that the new Pope seeks to continue the journey of renewal, but on a foundation of strong tradition. And indeed, from his very first speeches, Leo XIV has proven that to be true. A historic figure, 133 cardinal electors. In the recent conclave, 133 cardinal electors cast their votes, the highest number in the history of modern papal elections. To be elected, a candidate needs at least 89 votes, 2/3 of the total. Robert Francis Privos reached the necessary threshold within just 2 days. The 2025 conclave was one of the shortest in history, comparable to the elections of Benedict XVI in 2005 and Pope Francis in 2013. This indicates not only a high degree of consensus among the cardinals, but also a well-prepared and efficient transition after the resignation of Pope Francis. A global church in all its diversity. Among the 133 cardinal electors, 16 were from North America, including 10 Americans, 17 from Europe, 17 from South America, 18 from Africa, 23 from Asia, 4 from Central America, 4 from Oceania. This diversity truly reflects the modern face of the Catholic Church, a global community of over 1.3 billion faithful, spanning all continents and cultures. The election of a French-Spanish American as Pope is a clear sign of the Church's inclusive and outward-looking orientation. Age and vitality, 70 but full of energy. Leo XIV will celebrate his 70th birthday this September, considered a young age for a modern pope. Benedict XVI was elected at 78, and John Paul II at 58, one of the youngest popes of the modern era. At 70, Leo XIV brings mature insight and enough vitality to undertake a demanding papacy, filled with apostolic journeys, international meetings, and significant internal reforms. What the world's media is saying. The international media reacted strongly to the election of Leo XIV. Some key headlines. The Guardian. A pope who is relatable, modern, and globally minded. Le Monde. The return of the name Leo is a clear signal. A church that is engaged with society. The New York Times. From Chicago to the Vatican, the journey of an American Catholic now representing all humanity. Even social media exploded. The hashtag number Pope Leo XIV trended globally just hours after his balcony appearance. A name and a mission, defending the vulnerable. Those who knew Leo XIV during his time in Peru all say the same thing. He never sought the spotlight, but always stood up for the forgotten. From Lima's homeless to undocumented children in the Andes, he consistently said, "We cannot pray," and then turn away. Now, as Pope, he brings that same spirit to the global stage. Leo XIV is not just a name, said a Brazilian bishop. It's the name of an ideal that the Church must be a safe haven for those without a place. Humility and strength. At his first press conference, when asked how he planned to change the Vatican, Leo XIV simply smiled. "I didn't come here to change the Vatican. I came so that the Vatican wouldn't forget to change itself." That answer touched millions of hearts. Once again, the world was reminded that true power doesn't lie in authority but in humility, a faith that didn't begin in the Vatican. Before Robert Francis Privos became Leo XIV, before his name was proclaimed from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, and long before he donned the white papal cassock, his story had already been written in the simplest of lines. Inside a modest home in the suburbs of Chicago, there was no throne there, no ancient marble walls, only a father who loved education, a mother devoted to books, and a household filled with unwavering faith. People often imagine a priestly vocation as something supernatural, as if God calls directly from the heavens. But sometimes, that call comes much more softly through the pages of a book read by a mother, through the quiet guidance of a father, and through the church bells echoing on Sunday afternoons in the heart of a young boy. The father, quiet, firm, and full of love. Luis Marius Privos, father of Pope Leo XIV, was not a loud man. A school administrator by profession, He believed deeply in the power of knowledge and discipline. His eyes were stern, his voice measured, but every small act radiated love for his family. He never raised his voice, his eldest son, John, recalls, but every word he said made us listen. Vren. Luis believed that a child should not only learn to read and write, but to live rightly. Not just to succeed, but to become a good person. And he taught that not just through words, but through a life of quiet integrity. The mother, gentle, profound, and the light of faith. Mendez Martinez, the librarian mother, was a different kind of presence. Her love for books was passionate, but her greatest love was reserved for God and her family. Born in a family of 6 daughters in Chicago, Mendez graduated from Immaculata Catholic Girls High School in 1928, an uncommon feat for a minority woman at the time. Her devotion to education led her to DePaul University, where she met Luis. Both earned their master's degrees in 1949, a rare intellectual pairing in their era. She was the first to read the Bible to her sons, the one who always reminded them to pray before meals and bedtime. To her, faith wasn't abstract doctrine, it was something alive, present in every ordinary moment. She didn't preach the faith, she lived it. A small home, a great fire. The house in Don, a suburb of Chicago where Robert was born on May 14, 1955, might seem unremarkable to outsiders, but to the 3 sons of Luis and Mendez, it was a place of shelter, formation, and the nurturing of life's essential values. My father taught us how to live right. My mother taught us how to live holy, John said. In that home, the air was filled with books, prayer, and understanding. Robert the youngest grew up between his 2 older brothers, Luis Jr. and John, in a space filled with love, but also with clear principles. Playing Mass, a destiny revealed. Neighbors recall that while most kids in the neighborhood played cops or soldiers, Robert liked being a priest. He would turn the living room into a church, the ironing board into an altar, Nick's candy into communion, and his brothers had to sit quietly like churchgoers. He didn't treat it like a game, John remembers. He was very serious. What sounds like a cute childhood anecdote was, to his family, something more. They had long sensed that Robert's faith and calling were real. Reflections from the eldest brother. In an interview after his younger brother's papal election, Luis Jr. recalled, "I was lying in bed watching on television. When I heard Roberto's name, I jumped up, got dressed, and danced like a crazy man. I couldn't believe it." He added with a laugh, "I used to tease him when we were younger. You're so holy, you're probably going to be Pope someday. And now, here we are." Though, memories that never fade. Both of Leo XIV's parents passed away in the 1992nd Mendez in 1990, Luis in 1997, but their memory remains vivid in the hearts of their 3 sons. In a moving interview with the New York Times, John said, holding back tears, "If our parents were still alive, they'd be on cloud 9 with joy." And perhaps that's true, but even if they are watching from heaven, what they left behind, their faith, compassion, and spirit of service, has remained with Robert throughout his life. 1 home, 3 paths, 1 shared pride. All 3 Privos brothers followed different paths, yet each carried their parents' spirit. John became a school principal. Luis Jr. worked in engineering, and Robert, the once youngest boy who played Mass in the living room, now leads over 1.3 billion Catholics around the world as Pope. "I'm not jealous," John said. "I'm proud. Because I know it didn't start in the Vatican, it started in that little house where we grew up." From Illinois to the Vatican, a journey of faith and formation. Not everyone born in a small town outside Chicago becomes Pope. But not every Pope comes from such humble beginnings either. The truth is, no Pope comes out of nowhere. Every one of them is shaped by a family, a community, and a journey nurtured day by day. For Leo XIV, that journey began with a school administrator father who believed in virtue, a librarian mother who loved the Mass, and 2 older brothers who often got dragged into playing church in the living room. The youngest of the Privos brothers, Robert, and his 2 older brothers. Robert Francis Privos was not only a bright and well-behaved boy, but also the youngest of 3 brothers, a position often overlooked, yet one that receives a very special kind of love. His 2 older brothers, Luis Jr. and John, shared with him an unforgettable childhood, one filled with memories that sparkled in the backyard, at church, and in the classroom. But for Robert, that childhood carried the mark of something even greater. From an early age, while other children played superheroes or cops, Robert chose to be a priest. Robert would say Mass, and Luis and I were the congregation, John recalled. He was very serious. No laughing, no joking. He really treated it like a sacred ritual. Games that were never just games. Little Robert would place an iron on a table to serve as an altar. Pieces of candy were cut into small bits to act as communion hosts. At first, his older brothers joined in just for fun, but eventually, they realized he wasn't playing. He was living in a world of his own, a world where faith was real, and the priesthood wasn't just a distant dream. There were times I thought, maybe he's just taking this pretend play a bit too seriously, John laughed. But now I know it was a calling. Even the neighbors couldn't help but notice the strange little boy. One woman in the neighborhood once saw Robert holding Mass with candy and an iron and exclaimed, "That boy, he's going to be the first American pope someday." When a joke becomes reality, and then, more than 6 decades later, that offhand prediction came true. On May 8, 2025, white smoke rose from the Sistine Chapel. The College of Cardinals had elected the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church. The name was announced, Robert Francis Privos, the new Pope Leo XIV. "I couldn't believe it," Luis Jr. said in an interview with ABC News. "I jumped out of bed, threw on clothes so fast I didn't even know what I was wearing. Then I danced around the house like a madman." For the Privos family, it was a moment that felt impossible, yet brought back every memory of childhood as if no time had passed. "We used to tease him that he'd be Pope someday, and now he actually is," Luis laughed. A surreal feeling, joy beyond words. For John, the second brother and a retired school principal, the moment felt like something out of a dream. I just sat there in silence. Part of me couldn't believe it, but another part knew it made perfect sense. John said that Robert had always been different. While other kids were still choosing between becoming doctors, engineers, or pilots, Robert was consistent. He wanted to be a priest. Never any doubt, never wavered, he said. One family, 3 paths, one common route. The 3 Privos brothers grew up under the same roof, shaped by the same values instilled by their parents: faith, knowledge, and kindness. Though each would go on to walk a different path, none ever forgot where they came from. Luis Jr. pursued engineering. John went into education and became a high school principal. And Robert, as the world now knows, followed the path that led to the church and ultimately to the papacy. "I don't feel like my brother is greater than us," John said. "I just feel that God chose him and he listened." Brotherhood and an unbreakable bond. Even as adults living far apart, the bond among the 3 brothers never faded. John recalled how Robert always made time to call home, check in on the family, and show deep concern for his brother's health. Even when he was working in Peru or later in Rome, he never forgot our birthdays, John said. When Robert became Pope, one of the first calls made from the Vatican was to connect with his 2 brothers, not as a formality but simply because they are family, father and mother, co-founders of faith. Though their parents, Luis and Mendes, passed away long ago, they are still remembered as the spiritual pillars of Pope Leo XIV's life. In his first address as Pope, he did not forget to mention them. "My father taught me discipline. My mother taught me faith. Together, they taught me to love through action, not words." He shared that every decision he's made, every path he's taken, echoes back to that little house in Dawn where values weren't just taught, but lived every single day. From Dawn to the Vatican, more than a journey, a mission. Pope Leo XIV's story isn't a tale of climbing to power. It is a journey of going deeper into oneself, into calling, and into faith. From a boy who once used candy as communion hosts, to a man who spent 2 decades serving the poor in Peru, to the spiritual leader of 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide, every step carries the imprint of his family. A simple truth: no crown without roots. Today, the new pope may live among centuries-old marble columns, guarded by Swiss soldiers, and speak from the grand balcony of St. Peter's, but deep in his heart, there remains a modest home in Dawn where 2 older brothers, 2 devoted parents, and a little boy once solemnly celebrated Mass. using candy and a household iron. Pope Leo XIV is not just a man of the church. He is a man of his family, a family that sowed the seed of vocation quietly, but no less miraculously. The multicultural roots of Pope Leo XIV. When people speak of Pope Leo XIV, formerly Robert Francis Privos, they often picture a warm, approachable man with a sharp sense of humor. But to truly understand him, one must look deeper into the roots of a multicultural family that nurtured one of the most unique spiritual leaders of our time. He is the son of a father of French-Italian descent and a mother of Spanish heritage. Even more intriguingly, on his maternal side, his ancestors came from the 7 wards of New Orleans, a place where African, Caribbean, and European cultures converge. A silent but profound cultural fusion. What's striking about the Privos family is that ethnicity was rarely a topic of discussion, not out of denial, but because it was never considered a defining measure of worth. In the worldview passed down by his parents, values like knowledge, faith, and kindness mattered more than skin color or background. As John Privos once said, "We didn't see ourselves as black or white. We were simply Catholic, children of God, and people with responsibilities." Yet no one can deny how deeply this multicultural background shaped Leo XIV's character and worldview. It explains why he has always shown profound compassion and humanity toward marginalized communities, no matter where they come from. A man of the world, yet still American. Although he has spent decades living and working in Peru, Italy, and other countries, Pope Leo XIV has never hidden the fact that he hails from Chicago, USA. He once said, "I carry the heart of an American, but my soul belongs to the world." That a U.S. citizen would one day be elected Pope was unheard of in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. But for Leo XIV, it hasn't changed his sense of identity, it has only deepened his sense of duty to bridge East and West, North and South, tradition and modernity. From a suburban neighborhood to the heart of the world. Coming from a quiet suburban neighborhood in South Chicago, few would have imagined that young Robert, the altar boy at the local parish, would one day become the leader of over 1 billion Catholics worldwide. But it happened not by chance, but through a lifetime of faith, determination, and service. He once told a group of young people, "I never saw my background as a limitation. It was the values I learned in a small neighborhood that gave me the strength to go far." Diversity that sharpens perspective. His multi-ethnic background has also given Pope Leo XIV the ability to deeply empathize with many communities across the globe, especially those often overlooked in global decision-making. Immigrants, the poor, people of color, and religious minorities. He is not merely the inheritor of a religious throne, he carries a cultural mirror that reflects the identity of the modern world, a world in which rigid lines between peoples are fading, replaced by a shared search for truth and love. Carrying forward the spirit of Pope Francis. As the successor to Pope Francis, the first pope from Latin America, Leo XIV is keenly aware that he was not chosen to start an entirely new era, but to continue and expand the reformist, inclusive, and humble legacy of his predecessor. John recalls, "They were friends. Even before Robert became a bishop, they had met many times." Oh well, that explains why Leo XIV doesn't carry the air of distant authority, but comes across as a teacher, a big brother, and a friend to all who seek him, moderate but never silent. Many describe Pope Leo XIV as a moderate, neither firmly conservative nor overtly progressive. But he has never stayed silent in the face of injustice or when conscience calls him to speak. He prays, he listens to God, but he also listens to cardinals, priests, nuns, and ordinary people, Louis says. And that is what makes him stand out, a pope who listens. And when he listens, he does not hesitate to act. A global heart from a local soul. The story of Pope Leo XIV is one of harmonious contrasts. An American with a global spirit, born into a poor family, yet intellectually expansive, with ancestors from diverse cultures not in conflict, but in natural harmony. A modern-era pope, yet deeply rooted in tradition. Conclusion: a pope, and also a regular person. He never forgets that he was once a boy using candy as communion wafers, teased by his brothers for being overly devout, and in tears the day he left home to begin his missionary journey. To Leo XIV, A title does not define a man defines the title. And perhaps it is this humility and sincerity that have made him a new kind of symbol not only for the Catholic Church, but for a world longing for connection, kindness, and a faith big enough to transcend all differences. Leo XIV, a new chapter for the Church, a living testament of family faith. The story of Pope Leo XIV is not merely a historical milestone for the Catholic Church. It is also a profound testament to the strength of family, enduring faith, and unwavering perseverance through adversity. Before becoming the successor of St. Peter, Robert Francis Privos was just a suburban boy from Don, Illinois, raised in a humble home filled with love and spiritual guidance from his parents and two older brothers. It was this foundation that shaped not only his intellect but his soul, preparing him for a great mission in an era of uncertainty and change. A boy who played Mass in the living room. He didn't come from nobility or academic elites, but from a modest, devout Catholic family. A story often shared by his second brother, John, is especially touching. Robert didn't play cops or doctors like other kids. He played priest. We were the congregation, and he would celebrate Mass serious and full of faith. Their living room in Don became a mini church, with an ironing board as the altar and candies as communion wafers. No one then could have imagined that these innocent games would be the beginning of a journey to the Vatican. Parents, the silent teachers. If one were to seek the true origin of Pope Leo XIV's vocation and holiness, it would undoubtedly begin with his parents, Luis Marius Privos and Méndez Martinez. Luis, a school supervisor, was strict yet loving. He taught not just academics but morals, honesty, and community service. Méndez, a librarian, was the keeper of the family's spiritual flame. She told Bible stories like fairy tales, led nightly prayers, and turned every meal into a moment of spiritual connection. Our family wasn't wealthy, John shared, but we were rich in faith, rich in knowledge, and rich in love. The dinner table, where faith was nurtured. According to the Chicago Tribune, the Privos household was a model of a classic Catholic family. Every meal was more than just eating, it was a sacred time to listen, share, and pray together. They discussed the day's events. They asked about school, friends, and parish life. They shared memorable Sunday homilies, and above all, they prayed as one. These habits deeply rooted in Robert a love for parish life and a desire to serve the community. Brother John, our parents would be in heaven. Though their parents passed away in the 1992nd, their memory remains vivid in the hearts of their three sons, especially John, who has witnessed every step of his younger brother's journey. When Robert was elected Pope, John told the New York Times with emotion, "If our parents were alive, they'd be in the clouds with joy. But I believe they're smiling from above, knowing that what they planted has now come into full bloom." Family, the foundation of global compassion. Leo XIV's election surprised the Vatican, but it also turned the little house in Don into an emotional epicenter. His two brothers, Luis and John, embraced and wept with joy, continually crediting their parents. To them, Robert was never just the Pope, he was still their little brother, the one who once loved playing priest. "He's still Robert," Luis told ABC News, "a man who listens, who lives with holiness, and carries deep responsibility for others, never forgetting his roots, even at the summit." As he stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica and gave his first apostolic blessing not just to the sea of faithful below but seemingly to those who first taught him to pray, Pope Leo XIV carried with him the spirit of home. Every word of blessing, every compassionate gaze echoed the presence of his parents, the golden sunsets through his hometown church windows, and the whispered prayers under warm lamplight where faith was passed down like a sacred flame. A mission born from family love. Leo XIV's deep faith did not come from elite seminaries, but from the simple teachings of his parents. From altar serving, attending Mass with his brothers, to Bible stories lovingly retold by his mother, these formed the bedrock of his priestly soul. He never believed he was chosen by God at random. He believed God used ordinary people like his parents to accomplish extraordinary things. A pope, with a whole family behind him. In every speech, whether at the Vatican or on the global stage, Leo XIV often mentions a small home in Chicago. Even as he leads over 1 billion faithful, He hasn't forgotten the feeling of standing in that living room, pretending to offer Mass. That's why many call him the Pope of the family, not just because he comes from a good family, but because he deeply understands the power that family love can generate. Conclusion: every step carries a memory. When he stepped out onto the Apostolic Palace balcony and raised his hand in blessing, millions saw a pope. But if you looked closer, in his eyes, you might see the image of his father who taught him to stand firm, the tenderness of his mother who brought him closer to God, the laughter and tears of two older brothers who always believed, "Our little brother will do something great." Leo XIV did not walk alone to the papal throne. Each step he takes echoes his childhood, his family's faith, and a belief that never faded. From a small living room to the heights of the Vatican, a difficult journey. Even after becoming Pope, Leo XIV had no intention of stopping or resting. He understood that his new position came with enormous responsibility not only to the Church, but to all of humanity. Immediately after his inauguration, the young Pope was faced with intense challenges on the global stage, intensifying religious conflicts in many regions, widespread poverty and growing social injustice, a growing disillusionment among the youth toward the traditional Church. A journey toward common ground. Leo XIV was determined to build a church that was closer to the people, not just a spiritual leader, but a companion in all walks of life. He regularly visited poor communities, hospitals, and prisons. He organized interfaith dialogues to reconcile tensions. He encouraged young priests to open life skills, classes, and support programs for youth. A global mission, yet always rooted in family. In his early international visits, Pope Leo XIV often spoke about his roots and the strength he drew from family in his homilies. He said, "Only when every family is loved and cared for can society truly grow in peace and sustainability." He called on governments to focus on policies that support families, educate children, and protect cherished traditional values. Change to adapt, without losing identity. The Pope also recognized that the modern age demands the Church to evolve in its approach, while holding firm to the core of its teachings, using modern technology to spread the message of faith, encouraging young believers to take part in social initiatives, supporting the development of small parish groups as bridges between the Church and the wider community. A long road ahead, fueled by strong faith. The first few months of his papacy were filled with trials but also with hope. With the values instilled by his family, a heart full of faith, and unwavering perseverance, Leo XIV set a clear goal: to make the Church a common home for all people. Light cannot exist without darkness. Although Pope Leo XIV received widespread support, not everyone welcomed his changes and new approaches. Certain conservative factions within the Church and political powers outside it began plotting against the young pontiff. They saw Leo XIV as a threat to traditional authority. Internal disputes became increasingly heated. External pressures intensified, with media campaigns aiming to undermine the Pope's credibility. Opposition within the Church. Some conservative clerical groups strongly disagreed with Leo XIV's promotion of interfaith dialogue and his push to involve young people more actively in church life. They claimed the Church was losing its traditional solemnity. On several occasions, they attempted to obstruct his new initiatives and even conspired in secret to destabilize his position. Political conspiracies and external forces. Beyond the Church, governments and powerful organizations grew wary of Leo XIV's rising influence. Some forces wanted the Pope to remain neutral and refrain from engaging in political issues. Smear campaigns were launched to tarnish his image and sow doubt among the faithful. Leo XIV responds with faith and steadfastness. Despite facing fierce opposition, Leo XIV remained unshaken. He reminded the world, faith is never the easy road, but it is through trials that faith is tested and shines the brightest. He continued to promote dialogue, uphold transparency, and stay true to his mission. Strength from the people. The Pope's sincere actions and words gradually won over the hearts of people around the world. Millions of believers sent letters, offered prayers, and expressed their support. Volunteer groups and youth movements increasingly took part in social initiatives inspired by the Pope. A struggle not just for the Pope, but for all humanity. Leo XIV stood not only as the head of the Church, but as a symbol of the eternal struggle between light and darkness, between change and conservatism, between hope and fear. He understood that the road ahead would be difficult, but with love and faith, all things are possible. A vision beyond borders. Leo XIV did not stop at reforming the church. He aspired to spread a message of love and peace across the world regardless of religion, ethnicity, or nationality. He organized interfaith meetings to foster understanding and cooperation. He called on world leaders to join hands in addressing humanitarian crises such as poverty, war, and climate change. A mission of education and human development. One of Leo XIV's core focuses was investing in education, particularly for the youth, who are seen as the future leaders of the world. He founded numerous academies and training centers with comprehensive programs combining scientific knowledge and moral education. He expanded initiatives to support underprivileged children and those in remote areas, providing them access to quality education. The Light for the World campaign. To spread love and hope, Leo XIV launched a global campaign called Light for the World, which included activities such as fundraising efforts to build hospitals and shelters for the poor, mobilizing volunteers to participate in disaster relief and care for the marginalized, organizing concerts and conferences to raise awareness about compassion and solidarity, spreading through social media and technology. Recognizing the power of technology in the 21st century, Pope Leo XIV embraced digital platforms and social media to reach a wider audience. His messages and homilies were broadcast live across multiple platforms. His humble, relatable image created a strong bond with younger generations. Positive response from the global community. The Pope's campaigns and initiatives quickly garnered widespread support. Numerous NGOs and representatives of other faiths joined in cooperation. International media widely reported on and praised the humanitarian and unifying spirit embodied by Leo XIV. Leo XIV, a symbol of hope. Pope Leo XIV has gradually become a global symbol of hope, renewal, and compassion in a modern era. He is not only a religious leader but also a guide for a world longing for peace and sustainable progress. Internal challenges. Although Leo XIV received widespread support, not everyone within the church agreed with his new perspectives and approaches. Some conservative clergy feared that rapid changes might erode long-standing traditions. Internal debates continued to arise over the church's role in politics and society. External pressures. Leo XIV also faced pressure from political forces that opposed reform or feared the church's growing influence in international affairs. Negative media campaigns were launched to undermine the Pope's credibility. Some governments imposed restrictions to limit the church's involvement in their domestic issues. Media crisis. The rapid growth of social media became both a tool and a challenge. Rumors and misinformation spread quickly, distorting the Pope's image. Leo XIV had to spend considerable time addressing these issues and preserving the truth. Health and psychological pressure. The demanding nature of his life and responsibilities began to take a toll on the Pope's health. He experienced several bouts of fatigue but remained committed to fulfilling his mission. Advisors and medical staff closely monitored and supported him, sustaining spirit and faith. Despite the many difficulties, Leo XIV consistently maintained his faith and optimism. He often reminded others of the power of love and perseverance. He regularly prayed and meditated to restore his strength and clarity. Lessons from adversity. Rather than weakening him, the challenges helped Leo XIV grow and strengthen his resolve. They deepened his understanding of humanity and the world. They laid a solid foundation for the Church's future progress. A vision for the Church's development. Leo XIV not only focused on present-day issues but also laid out a long-term plan for the sustainable growth of the Church, strengthening the Church's role in education and social development, encouraging initiatives to protect the environment and promote global peace, developing modern training programs for priests and clergy that align with contemporary realities. Aspirations for global peace. One of Leo XIV's central missions was to promote peace and dialogue among nations and religions. He presided over interfaith conferences to foster understanding and collaboration. He partnered with international organizations to resolve conflicts and support the poor and displaced. He emphasized that religion should serve as a bridge, not a source of division. Embracing modern technology. Pope Leo XIV understood the critical role of technology in today's world. He encouraged the Church to use social media and digital platforms to spread its teachings. He supported the development of mobile apps to help believers access information, pray, and engage with their communities. He promoted the digitization of religious texts and holy scriptures for preservation and wider dissemination. The beginning of a new era. Leo XIV became a symbol of renewal. With an open spirit and far-reaching vision, he inspired younger generations to pursue faith and human values. He laid the groundwork for a church that not only honors the past, but is also ready to adapt to the future. He continued to build bridges between tradition and modernity, between faith and science. Final message. Let us move forward together, with faith and love, for a better world. Leo XIV. Pope Leo XIV left a profound mark on the history of the Catholic Church through his blend of tradition and innovation. From internal challenges to global missions, he promoted unity within the Church and with other religious communities, expanded the Church's influence in education, society, and global issues, embraced modern technology to effectively spread the teachings of the faith, affirmed the Church's role in peace-building, interfaith dialogue, and sustainable development, inspired younger generations and laid the foundation for the Church's future in a changing world. A shared message. Pope Leo XIV was not only a religious leader, but also a symbol of progress, harmony, and hope. His journey reminds us that faith and knowledge can walk hand in hand. Peace begins with understanding and mutual respect. The future belongs to those who embrace change while holding firm to core values.